Looks like I'm ready. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Meadows and Makers podcast. I'm your host, Greg, also known as Making Stuff in the Hive community. And today I have on a special guest with me, Nicole Sauce of Living Free in Tennessee. She's a homesteader. She helps run the Self Reliance Festival. She's a coffee roaster. This girl does not slow down. So, uh, so tonight we're gonna get into Nicole's story, and we're gonna get to know Nicole a little better here. So, welcome to the podcast, Nicole. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on my show.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Well, so what I typically like to ask people when they first come on. So, why are you so into talking about homesteading? Like, what brought you to this point? What got you to that point of wanting to start a homestead and get your podcast and all this stuff going where you're at right now?
I never thought I'd be a homesteader. If you would have asked me in my teenage years what I was going to be, I was going to be living in a city.
That's what I was wondering about you, is if you
Yeah,
were originally a city person or.
I was not. I grew up in a urban rural fringe environment in Oregon, and my mom had a giant garden and she canned, and we didn't have any livestock ever. And my whole family was rural people. And at some point in my teen years, we moved to Washington, D.C., and I got all into cities and thought that was cool. And I started going to clubs, sang rock and roll. And that just didn't seem like a big rural thing. And I was in Oregon into my 30s working as I was an executive trainer, I was a cultural trainer, and I worked at a software startup company. So I was just sort of getting into marketing and teaching and all these cool things. And that taught me lots of great skills for later in life. But what really happened is along the journey, I transitioned philosophically from more of a communism sort of supporter to a liberty-based thinker, then started working in libertarian public policy at the state level, and moved to Tennessee for 6 months to help a nonprofit get started here to work on government policy.
So what year did that happen when you made that move?
2006.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 2006. And when I got to Tennessee, I just loved it. It was like Oregon used to be before the commies took over. And I was like, this is great. It's a little hot in the summer, but whatever. And real estate was super affordable. Property taxes are like, boop. I mean, people complain about property taxes here, but they don't live in Oregon. So, and you pay income tax there too. So I moved here. I went home 6 weeks later, moved here, and started, like, I was always trying to save the world. I wanted people to tell their stories so people would understand why individual liberty is the way we make a better world for everybody, even people who have lots of needs, right? And less ability to take care of themselves. And I started a nonprofit ultimately to do that. And as a result of having this mission and this drive, I ended up the president of the nonprofit, which is good, right? No,
Uh,
that's not good.
I don't know. I've
Because
never
what did I tell you? I
run a
love
nonprofit.
teaching, I love creativity, I love doing things, all of that. And when you're president of a nonprofit, I mean, ultimately the president can do what they want. But what I found myself doing was hiring and firing, holding people accountable, and making sure paperwork was right, and raising money from donors, and very little time doing what I actually loved doing. And in that time, I had moved from Nashville to the country because I
Okay.
wanted to get away. And part of that was related to a different story. We're not going, it'll totally take us on a rabbit trail if I go there.
Okay.
As a result of being in the country, I was like, hey, let's get chickens. Chickens are the gateway drug to, sorry, somebody just came to my door who I'm not expecting, I think. So
Okay.
chickens are the gateway drug to homesteading.
They really are. Yeah.
And within like the first 6 months of being here, I was just, canning everything, all of it. And I ended up being like the resource for that, which led me to starting Living Free in Tennessee, which is my podcast. Because I was like speed dial for canning. I was like, well, how about I just do a podcast about things we do in the country? That'll be fun. It'll be creative. And my job sucks. So I'm going to do this because it's fun.
S-
And one day I realized my job was killing me, quit, didn't have any clue how I was going to make money. Already had the podcast started. I was already a coffee roaster and pretty much scrambled forward until I found the couple of things I should focus on. That first year I did 10 or 12 side hustles.
oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I kind of had a similar thing happen to me.
Yeah.
I kind of got disillusioned with the the whole system that we live in, and needed to do something or go crazy basically. So
Yeah.
um, started an off grid journey
That's pretty
and
cool.
started messing around with solar stuff and seeing if I could make it off grid. It's a lot harder than I thought.
It's the thing about being off grid is you have to fix everything, right?
Yes.
Because you don't just, I mean, some people can come help you fix things, but you're responsible ultimately. Tag from Life Done Free and I were talking about that the other day, and I'm not off grid. Like we're using grid power right now, but some parts of my property are like my whole water system is its own thing. And I had a failure in my pump house last week. I
Yeah,
had to fix it.
it's
So I
on
go to the
you.
plumbing store. I'm like, I want a high-low switch so that when the tank is out of water, it shuts off so I don't burn out my pump. Because I've almost burned out my pump 3 times in the last 2 weeks.
Hmm. Dang.
Yeah. And he was like, well, take this switch, do this. And so I do that. It doesn't work. And I came and I showed him a video. He's like, I have never seen that happen before. And he's
You're
like, hey
like,
guys, look, have you ever seen a pump try to start like a car like this?
you're like, well, thanks.
Yeah. Then he explained why he thought it was happening. He and Tactical disagree. Tactical was not with me. And I was like, you're going to go talk to the guy if you're not going to do what the guy says.
You're
Because
like,
talking through me to the guy is not going to work.
you're like, hey, I got a guy.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I'm going
Oh,
to
you're
mute for a
good.
second.
All right.
Sorry. Got
Oh,
the
you're.
spring cold.
Oh,
Anybody else got it this year?
I know. I got sick a lot. Well, a lot more than I usually do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I went through it way earlier.
Yeah. This is my first cold since 2020. I've just had COVID a few times.
Yeah. Um. So going back to what you said earlier, so you kind of had like kind of a commie mentality, and then you went to
Yeah.
libertarian. Was there something? Was there a book you read? Was there somebody talk to you? Was it stuff you were experiencing that
Yeah,
made
there
you
was a catalyst.
kind
There
of?
was a very memorable catalyst, and it was from one day to the next that it happened.
And it was
It
it?
literally happened like I know the thought I had, and I was like, oh. So at that time, so well, I'll say set the foundation is there are a lot of entrepreneurs in my family.
Okay.
Okay, my grandfather started a restaurant, made enough money for them to retire early, and that has like permeated all of the family. So the secret was there. I just hadn't seen the secret, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was commuting into downtown Portland on light rail. Well, bus first. Then they put light rail in, and as a result of light rail going in, my 20-minute commute turned into an hour and 20 to hour and a half commute because I had the bus to light rail, change, wait for light rail in. Light rail is the slowest train you can have. It
Okay.
might be slower than the trolley, but trolleys are pretty slow too. Like I can walk faster than trolleys in Portland, Oregon, most of the time. So, and I remember thinking about this, and I was like, this could have been done so much more efficiently. My 20-minute bus was fine. They could have just had a bus only lane or something, and it would have been perfect. It would have been to work even faster. If I was in charge, this is what went on my head. If I was in charge, this system would be better. And I was like, wait a minute. It's not fair if I'm in charge.
Hmm.
And it was a fairness thing. And I was like, what? Well, everything I think about is if I'm in charge, this should be this way. And if I'm in charge, that should be that. And that's not a fair thought because I shouldn't have to be in charge. Like, what makes me so great to be in
Right.
charge? Right.
Yeah.
And if I have to be in charge to command other people, that's not fair to them because they're being commanded. And I walked out of my office on the same floor to the office across the hall, which just happened to be the Cascade Policy Institute, a libertarian think tank in Portland, Oregon.
In
And I
Portland, Oregon.
in Portland, Oregon.
Wow.
And I already had met somebody who worked there because he did rental properties. And so we were just friends. And I was like, so I had this thought. And I told him my thought. And he's like, yeah, let me talk to you about the non-aggression principle, And so it was just like I had this highly intellectual, liberty-based dude who ended up being my best friend. We're friends to this day.
Wow.
Where I could ask all of the questions that you ask when you realize that the system that you thought was going to work isn't going to work.
Wow.
And like, okay, now read this book or that paper. And so that's actually I ended up working at Cascade Policy Institute and then going into the wider movement from there. So that it was literally just that it's not fair thought. And I wish more people would realize that about government regulation. It's just not fair.
So I have to ask you this. I think maybe we've all gone through our libertarian phase where we were super into the Libertarian Party and try to see if we can make something happen with that. So, and shouting at everyone saying, "Hey, I've got liberty, man! Come check out
I
this
found Joe Liberty.
come get your liberty over here, man! Come on!"
Born again libertarian. Yeah.
So did you go through that like shouting liberty from the rooftops kind of phase?
I did not ever get behind the Libertarian Party per se. Like I would vote for libertarian candidates, but I wasn't ever I'm going to go door to door for county commissioner or whatever.
Yeah.
But I did, of course, get up in people's face at my job. They knew the fastest way to get me off on a tangent, on a rant, was to talk about how light rail was the best way to move people around. And I would go off on all of the other transit options that would be better.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because and specifically Portland, because there was a guy I think that was in from the Cato Institute or something. It was a book that I read. It was a guy named Randall O'Toole, and he
I know
called
him.
it the best laid plans, and he talked
Yeah.
about the whole issue with
Yeah.
centralized planning of cities and stuff, and how you could do it way better with the free market.
How's
So.
that going for you, Portland?
I remember reading in one part of the book that they set up all this public transportation with the trains like you're talking about, and nobody used it. And there were the places that nobody wanted to go, and then wild animals started to get on the trains.
I mean, there are people on the trains, but it's the ridership numbers were very disappointing, and they were able to get ridership up when they established the fare free zone, so it was free in one part of the city. Then more
Oh,
people rode it. But I could tell you as just personal testimony, light rail was implemented. I got in my car and started driving to and from work from a suburb of Portland in Portland because an hour and a half times 2 is 3 hours of my day in the transit system, and it was still 25 minutes most of the time unless there was an accident in the car.
yeah, okay.
So that means I spend an hour on my commute maybe, and I get 2 hours back that I could make money with. And the money I made with those 2 hours, and I took a second contracting gig, paid for my parking pass in downtown Portland.
Oh, okay.
And for me, that was better. And, the skills I learned side hustling there are probably skills that serve me to this day. So,
Wow. Wow. So, so yeah, that's kind of the thing. What your friends, you said that he gave you some books to read. Do you remember any of like that was really
Well, I
key?
read The Road to Serfdom by F.A. Hayek.
Mm-hmm.
I never finished any Ayn Rand book except for Anthem. So I
Okay.
read Anthem, and I think I read it because it was in the public domain, and I was just like, "Oh, there's this random book in the public domain. I'll read it." And it's like, have you read that one?
I have
Short.
I
It's
have
super
not.
short. I started Atlas Shrugged, and I know people are going to be pissed at me for saying this. I think Ayn Rand is too wordy. It goes on to, and so I was like, I'm kind of bored, and I never finished it. And somebody told me it's better as an audiobook, so I haven't tried that.
Yeah.
But I think I get the point. It's one of those things. It's like, and I've worked with some people who are, philosophers, deep into objectivism, and they put a lot of time and thought into essays they write, and I think that's cool for them. For me, I feel like when I functionally understand something, um, I don't need to keep poking the what ifs so much for me when I've internalized something. And that pisses philosophers off
Yeah.
because, I mean, I am curious and I will read things,
Mm-hmm.
but, like I read Mein Kampf because I was like, I kind of want to see where Hitler was coming from on that whole thing.
Yeah.
And apparently he just really didn't like communists. Um, but so I've read a lot of like books like that where I want to understand where it's coming from to challenge my embracing of what ended up being anarchism in my life. I mean, I was I did the whole thing, I'm a libertarian.
Yeah. Six
Crap,
months.
I'm an anarchist.
6 months.
There it is. And now, yeah. So, um, and the non-aggression principle and all that. So, I don't know. I read things that challenge that to see is there something missing here because it is kind of interesting to read the critiques of
Yeah.
stuff. Um, but I don't. I mean, at this point in my life, I don't spend a lot of time reading those kinds of books. At this
Yeah.
hot minute, I'm a lot more likely to want to understand how to properly tar and char a fence post like Tactical does, so that it won't rot in the ground. And I'm a lot more keenly interested in how plants and animals work.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit before we started the podcast. So this is that you started the Self Reliance Festival, and I was saying how great that is because at a lot of these freedom conferences, you'll learn a lot about like the stuff that's going to be done to you, or maybe some remedy with legal type things from what I experienced. But going to your conference, the Self Reliance Festival, you get to learn some hands-on skills, and there's some great presenters that are there that teach you there with the stuff they've done, and uh, some cool actual some skills to make your life better.
Yeah, I think anytime we talk about being prepared or implementing something into our life, whether it's a philosophical shift or a lifestyle, we need to be keeping our top level goal in mind where we want to be as people. And each person has a different one. And each family has a different one, right? And that's totally cool. That's why our world is interesting. And so when I've seen a lot of conferences around liberty topics come up, it's always like how to get around this law, which is cool,
Yeah.
but not a lot of how do you as a person just declare independence
Mm-hmm.
no matter what happens. And I don't mean become a sovereign citizen and all of that. If that's how you do that, fine. But I just mean mentally, even if you are in a 6 foot by 6 foot cell because you're a hostage, how can you choose to be free in your mind?
Yes.
Because when your mind is free, then all the rest of it matters not. Some people take that to violent extremes and get all up in people's faces, and that's not what I mean. But it's something I realized when I looked at all the loophole conferences I go to. Loopholes are great but they close loopholes. And so if we focus all our time on learning the loophole, we don't learn the skills we need to find the loophole, or the skills we need to not be noticed if we don't find the loophole. You can just fill in whatever that means for you, right?
Right.
So, and there are things they have just not figured out how to control.
Yeah.
You know, I guess they could come onto my homestead and shut me down and confiscate my 12 ducks and burn my crops. And in wartime, things like that do happen. But the more you're able to build your own sustainability, and people think that word is evil, but it's actually a pretty cool word when you think about what it really means. But sustainability, both, for me, that means
Yeah.
off the land. That means growing food, but also financially, if you're responsible for your own income,
Mm-hmm.
you're less impacted by crazy things that happen where your boss could say, I'm not going to pay you or I'm going to fire you if you don't do what I want you to do.
Right.
Right. So that's important. It's sustainability in your relationships, your community. We have communities that have been imposed on us by geography and the government school system. So you're forced to go to this building with these kids who you might not actually like.
I hear you on that.
You are forced to interact with other parents you may not like if your kids are in the government schools. Like, all of that can be opted out of
Right.
without saying, I'm not going to do a gesture on your channel, but different finger to
Yeah.
the people, I'm leaving. It's like you're just not there anymore. It's kind of like what Uber did to taxis, right? We
Right.
figured out how to link people directly, and taxis freaked out because they had the whole system locked down as a monopoly,
Right.
basically. And they got unmonopolized, and that was it. It was like by the time that horse was out of the gate,
Exactly.
done.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed this in my own path is that, for a long time I was trying to yell at people on Facebook and social media saying like, you guys are wrong, look at all this stuff that's going on to you guys, you're getting played by the system here.
Yeah.
But then, it was just like I'm spending a lot of time doing this and not actually doing stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
um,
screaming on the internet does not equal convincing anybody of anything, or does not make your life better.
no, and I've just found that like, people are more interested in like if you're doing something,
Yeah.
they'll want to ask you questions like how did you do this stuff, and maybe that could plant a seed for somebody in the future just by you taking real actions and showing people, there's a cooler way of, maybe taking care of yourself and taking care of your family and having a community.
So we have somebody in my network whose marriage broke up for
Mm-hmm.
a good reason, and she found herself working a full-time job with two kids at home, single mom,
Mm-hmm.
in a house that had not been very well maintained for a long time
Mm-hmm.
and had a lot of clutter as a result of all that. And she got a week off of work for her vacation. And what she did is she came onto our digital community. She says, I'm going to be LFTN, insert the name of her state here, GSD crew. It's just me. I have planned a whole menu for the week. My kids are gone. I'm home alone. And this is a list of all these projects I'm going to work on. And she like completely decluttered her living room. She repaired hose bibs and I don't even know what. And every day she was like, this was my GSD day. And I get this, charcuterie platter at the end of the day. And I'm going to watch a movie with myself because that's all the GSD crew is. And I thought, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. And she just started taking control of things one step at a time. And I've watched her do this. Before she did this, I was watching her like, okay, I'm responsible for making my life better, so I'm going to make it better no matter what. And, we all have bad days when that happens. But she's done it. And I think she's going to be at this Self Reliance Festival in a week and a half.
Wow, cool.
I believe I saw that she had bought a ticket. So I'm like, sweet. She's going to go there. She's going to meet, 400 other people who either are improving their lives or are ready to start. And that means she ends up with a network of people who will morally support her on that journey rather than say, you can't do that because it's too hard because you're a single mom.
Yeah, and misery loves company is
It does.
something that I've found in my life is that the people that are really like on the surface level they may seem happy, but they are miserable and dying in their soul inside, and they just want to keep you from like trying anything or like doing anything that's outside of the nice comfortable norms.
Yeah.
It's
Kind of weird.
It's really weird. Yeah, it's like it's like a bunch of zombies like, be one of us or something. I don't know.
You must be. Yeah, I'm going to do. I'm going to
You
make a
need to
little weird
smile.
nose. Okay. I made a noise for a second. Sorry. I was just going to. Are you still there?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was going to share this out because I don't think I'm seeing my people on your stream. So I'm going to make sure they know we're live.
Oh yeah, cool. That would be great. Yeah, I tweeted it out earlier.
Yeah, no, I did too, but I was just like, I don't see my usual suspects.
Yeah, I was trying to pull up my chat and
Well, I see Billy Alexander has a question.
yeah, Billy,
Want me to
okay.
ask it?
I got it. Did
You got it?
Nicole? Billy's asking, did Nicole have family that she struggled with to bring on the path toward liberty, and if so, what was the outcome, and what was her takeaway from? What was your takeaway from that experience? So,
Okay, so I don't have children,
mm-hmm,
and the person I was with for 15 years was also a liberty oriented person. So I didn't have that immediate family struggle. Um, my my biological family, like mom, dad, sister, nieces, all of them, most of them were not liberty oriented, and some of them still are not liberty oriented. But here's the thing, the culture in our family is that the choice to embrace liberty is a choice. So to some extent, they are liberty oriented. If we're going to argue about how we solve the healthcare in air quotes crisis,
mm-hmm,
I'm going to disagree vehemently with my brother-in-law. And we've had long arguments about it, cheers each other at the end, and gone on having a bourbon around the fire. So that's the environment I'm in. I don't have people telling me, nobody in my family has ever told me, no, don't go start a homestead. That looks crazy. What they've said is, why do you want to live like that? And then I explain why. And then they go, oh, because it's my choice. And it's my life, not their life. And then they support me in the decision. So I feel like I'm really lucky in the family department as far as that goes. I have never felt driven to make my family into preppers or liberty people. I have watched, however, through exposure to what I'm doing, as family members slowly say, wait a minute, maybe this is a good idea. Like my sister is in California and they had wildfires near her and the power went out.
mm-hmm.
And she made it through. She's like, the power went out for like 3 days. And we were fine, but it got me to thinking, what would happen if city water stopped running? I said, well, funny you should ask that. What alternative water sources do you already have? Which she has one. And is there a way you could store water in case water goes out for 2 or 3 days? And what would you do if the wildfires got so close you had to get out? Do you know where you'd drive to?
Mm-hmm.
And then I walked away.
And just planted the seed, basically.
Just plant the seed. And, likewise, my mom was less liberty oriented than she is now. She's not as liberty oriented as I am. Mama Sauce.
Mama Sauce that comes to the
She is
SRF and
instrumental
is.
in SRF. She is liberty oriented, but she's not as far there as I am.
I
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah. And
Okay.
that's fine. Same thing. She wasn't really there when we started. And as she's worked for me for over a decade now. She's just been around it a lot and she's seen things that make sense.
Yeah.
So I think it's harder when you're in a relationship with somebody who's a spouse or a child, um, to make that transition. But the other thing is
I've heard a lot of people get divorces
they
because of the
can,
changing.
but if you learn to respect each other's difference of opinion on something and mutually support each other, it doesn't matter. I have seen people left and right, freedom, not freedom, be together and establish that respect, and it works. It's when one spouse feels like the other one has to do everything exactly as they do it that I think you start running into problems, or one spouse disrespects the other spouse as being crazy,
Yeah.
which, that's a huge bummer when that happens because I think families and strong families are so important.
Yeah.
They're so important. I wish I had managed to do that in my life. I didn't. I have
Yeah.
a strong holler neighborhood, but
Yeah, speaking of the community that you got around you, how did that get started? Does everybody just kind of live around each other, or I know intentional community is kind of a difficult thing. I've looked into that myself, and like, but then you start getting into all these things like who's got what, and like how are you gonna make it equitable for everybody that's involved, and how do you separate off the land, and are they going to rent the land, like how's it going to work? There's a lot of questions that come into starting some kind of like intentional community thing. So how did you approach that?
I had no intention of having an unintentional intentional community, as I call it. And I don't mean an like somebody saw me give a presentation on that and they're like, "We're so glad that you didn't say unintentional community and leave it there because that's apparently some buzzword in the intentional community world." And what happened is people started listening to my podcast and we started developing into a community. And there were standards in the community, like we're doers, not takers. Sometimes somebody needs help and they take. Like I've been taking a lot on my kitchen for the last 2 weeks in my bathroom this year. Like, oh, I've had a lot of help from holler neighbors and the wider community. But we're also givers. Like we give first and also grounded in learning to be more self-sufficient, more self-reliant, and freedom oriented. Tends to be core values. We respect other people's opinion making rights, I guess would be the best way to say it. So if you were going to sit Nighthawk and I down and go through all issues on the book, you would find out we disagree on some things. We've even talked about some of them. Again, that's not what we're here for. And, sometimes we have discussions and other times we're like, okay, we don't agree. Move on. So what happened here is they were listening to my podcast and places near me became available. So people who listened to my podcast who I'd met, I made them aware that like next door was available.
Okay.
And that's how everybody came together long term. So we had all met each other in person before. And that's when I was thinking, hey, we have sort of this holler neighbor thing going on. Maybe we should sit down and write a plan. So we did. Do we stick to the plan? We've
Yeah.
tried different things, so there's no rule book that we follow and this is it. It's been like, this is sort of our shared vision. This is the general thing about how we think boundaries work here. People who own things, and people who rent things have dominion over what they're renting. So like the Eversoles who live down the road now,
Yeah.
if they want to blast loud music in their house, it's none of my business.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Technically, Tactical and I own that house. We're renting to them, but it's none of our business.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, that's the way it should be. That helps when it comes to some of these things that piss people off that are none of their business.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to not take a bath for 3 weeks and smell like a pig, it's really none of my business unless I'm the one who smells like the pig and I don't like it. So, not that that's a big thing here, but sometimes we don't smell so good on the homestead. That's just the way that is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. When you're getting out and getting after it a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. So we then, when we do communal projects, we talk about it. But in fact, I need to have a meeting about the chickens that are arriving. We're doing our poultry processing class in June,
Okay.
and um, 50 baby chicks arrive here like Tuesday after Self Reliance Festival.
I just went through that process of
Yeah.
incubating my first chickens.
Oh, it's your first time.
The
Yeah,
first time I incubated them myself.
that's like, it's like having an infant that first time. You're like, I'm not going to sleep for the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, I came in.
What if they die? And then they don't. And you're like, oh, some do, but they don't.
Yeah, I went into my day job and I was like, I'm a chicken dad, and they were like looking at me like, what?
What are you talking about? Dad?
How does that work?
Yeah.
Um, so talk to me a little bit more about how your homestead goes. Like what all animals are you growing out there or raising out there, and do you have a food forest? Are you doing permaculture? How do you got it? I mean, and how long did it take you to get to where you're at right now?
It, so I guess I've been here 15-ish years, 16 years in that range now. And when I moved here, I had a garden the first year and chickens. And I
Okay.
didn't know what a homestead was, but I knew who Joel Salatin was.
Okay.
And I learned who the Barefoot Farmer was. And there's probably going to be somebody asking me a question in the background here in a second. Um, so it quickly escalated from that to me selling things at the farmer's market, to me meeting homesteaders, to maybe 9 or 10 years in, 8, 9, 10 years in, I learned what permaculture was.
Okay.
And the whole time I was trying to like design modern homesteading. I actually had a website all about modern homesteading where one system fed another, so it was less work.
You
And
were
I was learning about wild edible plants. And I was like, heck, they just grow out there on my land and I've been like cutting them down as weeds. Just grow where you are, man. Grow where
mm-hmm.
you are. So then I learned what permaculture was. And Toby Hemingway was very influential in the Portland area. So I understand why I was already trying to invent permaculture, which had already been invented.
Yeah.
But then when I discovered what it was, I looked around. I was like, crap, I did everything wrong. Now what? And it was a lot of work. And Nick Ferguson came out, and he's really good. He didn't judge me. He just came here and he was like, I think you should do this. And one of the things he really wanted me to do was get sheep, but I refused to get sheep.
Okay.
Because I was still hard-headed then.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still hard-headed now. But I did what he said one step at a time and implemented a permaculture plan here that meets my goals, which is to do events. And so most of my focus was getting the event space ready. So I've been doing an annual workshop here and a poultry workshop here every year we're going on year 6 now.
Oh, wow.
And it started with a rented tent and Jack Spirko speaking. And we installed an aquaponics system.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think my dad was at that, man.
yeah, I think your dad was at that one. And then every year since then, I have great speakers every year. We try to do a build every year. And the event space gets a little bit better. So at this point, I have a 30 by 50 foot covered area right out there, out that window that you can't see.
Oh, nice.
And so it can rain, it can wind, it can do whatever it needs to do. At base camp, which is just a short walk away, there's a 1,600 square foot basement that's heated and cooled.
Oh, wow.
So because in Tennessee, you know how the weather is, right?
Yeah, it's
super predictable. Like I had one event where it was
cold and rainy,
below 30 degrees
sunny
on day 1, hot on day 2, rainy on day 3.
Yeah.
Like, we got 3 seasons in one weekend.
Yeah.
So you gotta like I try to have a strategy to keep people. I mean, we're mostly outside for these events, but get them access to heat and cooling if it's one or the other extreme.
Hmm.
And we put in composting outhouses here, which are great. And all of that happened, and then I had a water problem where the water was going under my house. Had to move a hillside as a result of that. So lots of work went in, and
Oh wow.
finally, we're sitting back. Nick's like,
Can breathe a little bit.
I think the food forest goes there. And I said, I think you're right. I originally thought it would go over there, but now that we've moved the entire mountain, I think you're right. The food forest goes there. So we had a food forest installation workshop in October, and it's my first spring watching this thing come to life. Like we put it in,
Oh,
it got
cool.
cold, everything went to sticks.
Yeah.
And then over the winter, we had like a super cold winter in Tennessee. So I killed another 20 rosemary plants. The funny, if you listen to my podcast, you will hear me talk about how I kill rosemary plants like every year. But the rosemary plant died again, and I keep trying. 16 years later, I do not have a living rosemary plant that has managed to overwinter here yet.
Mm-hmm.
I
Wow.
had one start coming back one spring, and then it was like, this mid-April, we will drop to 16 degrees. Screw me. Done. The rosemary plant was like, I don't like you, and I don't like this state, and it died.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've experimented with a lot of different stuff on our homestead too, and talking on my podcast, I tell people to, you know, don't try to do everything all at once. Try to take bites at a time because it is. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
monumental task to
Yeah.
try to grow a great portion of your own food.
Yeah.
Um, can you say like you grow a certain percentage of your own food now, or um,
Okay.
that
The only meat
you're still working on a
No,
lot of
no,
that?
no. The only meat I eat that I don't grow, I buy from a farm. And that's that we get a whole cow that I split with another family every year. So I buy half a cow,
Okay.
and then I eat chickens that we raise. I eat turkeys that we raise, although if I have a turkey next year I'll buy it from a farm because I'll just have one. I eat lamb that we raise, and I eat venison that is shot here.
Wow.
And I guess when I have fish I buy that now too because nobody's fishing.
Yeah.
Um so like that part is pretty locked down, and all of my sources are either local or here.
Wow.
Vegetable wise, I would say 50% is grown here and 50% I'm buying in surplus from farmers nearby
Oh,
in
cool.
season. And I'm trying to think like, okay, so this year the only vegetables I bought at the store, I bought the occasional head of cabbage out of season because I like cabbage. And I know I was like, whoa, she bought cabbage.
Had to step into the grocery store for the
Crazy
cabbage.
talk. And then onions, because I usually don't grow onions. I usually buy them from the farmers, and they didn't have any this year. So I've been buying onions on the regular for cooking.
Okay.
I
Wow.
planted 160 onions a week ago.
Wow. Now, do you mainly focus on certain crops when you're growing food?
So I grow so I don't eat carbs anymore really. So that makes it easier to replace my food. I grow sweet potatoes, so that's a carb. I do grow potatoes. And I'll go through like maybe that many potatoes a year. Okay, so that's like a quarter bushel.
Okay.
And then I plant lettuces and greens and herbs, a whole bunch of those sorts of things every year. Radishes, I always end up with like, oh, these radishes are good, and then, oh, I'm so sick of radishes. Like that whole cycle happens.
Mm.
Green beans, tomatoes, peppers, and I always try the brassica family, so the broccoli and all of that, and I rarely succeed. This year
Hmm.
I had broccoli freeze dried for the winter because another farmer was really successful with it and it all got ripe at once, and he told me I could have it for super cheap. So
Wow.
I went and filled up the entire back of my Chevy Tahoe with broccoli plants, and I freeze dried it.
Oh wow. So you have your own freeze dryer?
Uh huh.
Oh wow.
That makes sense in a community to have. So originally I was like, well, anybody can use it, but pretty much I'm the only one who uses it. Rarely does somebody else use it, but they do. But
Yeah,
when you have a community of families, you can totally do that, and it's more affordable that way if you defray the costs.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah. I wanted to ask you about that because I think you guys do something where you guys have like a tool list or something where you kind of share certain tools or something like that.
there is a
Um,
tool list for the GSD crew where we know who has like a hammer drill or something, and or like Brian has an auger, which is really helpful when we need to put a bunch of trees in or fence posts. So I don't know who maintains that list. I don't maintain that list. I think Brian Young might be the one who does. Somebody else might in the GSD crew statewide. Yeah,
well, yeah, we were talking before we got started that in our group we got
yeah,
Sean Mills, and so he kind of tells us stuff that you guys have done, and so
yeah.
we have emulated a lot of that stuff
Cool.
because it's
Oh,
trying to be more successful with our group. And I think the whole GSD concept, the get shit done
yeah,
thing, is really great on building trust with each other, and getting to know each other a lot better when we help each other accomplish some kind of project.
yeah.
So um so did so does y'all's group connect up with some of the other groups that are around your area, or how are you guys kind of, is it just the holler neighbor kind of group
No,
that's got that
so
going on?
I would say we call ourselves the Tennessee Get Shit Done crew.
Mm-hmm.
And we do two kinds of things. We do sort of more open GSD events where if somebody hears this and they're like, I want to be part of that, you'll come to one of those. Those are more likely to be at my house because I'm not worried about psychos coming to my house because I have a really awesome next door neighbor who is a disgruntled, angry redneck. And you just don't want to sneak on the property without the redneck knowing you're coming on. We'll just put it that way. So, anyway, that's not why. I mean, people know where I'm a public person. People know where I live. If it became a problem, I would have to take steps. And it wouldn't, the step isn't never let anybody on the property. So, those happen. And then some people who are a little bit less public get to know people at these, and then they'll invite maybe a subset to their house for a project. That's how
Mm-hmm.
that tends to work. But we haven't done as many big public GSDs in the last couple of years, in part because I usually put those on, and I have not had the energy to with Self Reliance Festival. As it turns out, takes a lot of work,
Yeah.
and so I've been a little tired. And just not ready to do more events because I feel like I'm doing a lot of events right now. But I think I'll do some open houses here. So that's the Tennessee GSD crew, and we're all over the state, and some people come from other states for these.
Yeah.
So, like when I hear you have a GSD crew, I'm like, oh, heck, next time we have an open event, we should just let your GSD crew know. If they want to come out, they can.
Yeah.
The other network we operate in is called the LFTN Freedom Cell Network.
Okay.
And its intention is to get people aware that freedom cells exist, mostly focused in sort of the Tennessee state area. Um, and then when somebody says, "Oh, I'm in Knoxville," we're like, "Oh, there's a freedom cell in Knoxville. We're introducing you to those people," or "I'm in Chattanooga," or wherever.
Yeah.
So that's sort of what we're trying to do is connect all these groups as much as possible.
That's a great idea because I've been trying to think about how the whole idea of the freedom cells is that we can create our kind of hubs of our little groups and be able to figure out how we can like trade with each other and do stuff like that so that we can kind of get outside of the system. So I think we were able to meet at the SRF was kind of a
Yeah.
good rally point for our Alabama group. to kind of regionally meet. And from there,
Yeah.
we've done more events together. Like we did a mushroom inoculation workshop
Oh,
recently
fun. Yeah.
with some of the crew that was further down south. So so yeah, these events really help out. So let me ask, how did the Self Reliance Festival come about, and had you done any events before that, or
So I've
what
done
does
it.
it take to run an
What
event
does
like
it
that?
take to run an event? A lot. I did events like in the corporate world on and off. So I had some idea of what events looked like big events. Um, so there, I come in with that context, and I say that because people watched me start the Self Reliance Festival, and it grew really fast for a couple of reasons. A big one is I had spent 20 years of my career on and off doing events, so I kind of knew how that part worked. Mama Sauce is an event powerhouse,
Oh, okay.
and she's worked with me on it the whole time. John Willis can get people excited about some stuff, right?
Yeah.
And he was very gracious to just open his place. So I was already doing, I do the Living Free in Tennessee Spring Workshop, which is a lot like Jack Spirko's Survival Podcast Workshop, only I run it. So
Mm-hmm.
I have it like we have a sewing thing this time. I have some more focus on some of the feminine crafts, but also really cool dude stuff. So um, that is a 3-day workshop where people come to my homestead, camp if they want to, or stay at Airbnbs nearby. And we always do a build, like we're doing a solar install at this one. Last year we were working on a pond that didn't get finished. The year before that we did a solar water heater. Excuse me. Sorry. The year before that, I think we did a rocket mass heater. So there's always something like that going on in the background
Oh, cool.
if we can figure it out. And then we have great speakers. So we have John Pegliano's coming out to talk about, you know, making money during a recession, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got Toolman Tim coming out to talk about how to identify what poverty mindset is and let it go,
Mm.
which is something that a lot of people on our network are talking about right now, because we say poverty mindset and then they're like, we don't know what that means. And that's a good point. So we're going to talk about that. And at the same time, we'll do practical things like sewing. I'm going to do food preservation. There's going to be a lot of solar presentations at this one, just standalone solar presentations, probably a wild edible walk. So that's been going on for a while. And John Willis knew I did that.
Okay.
And he and I became closer when he reached out to me about coffee, and I started doing his coffee for SOE. And
Oh.
then my coffee roaster caught on fire, and he helped me close some money on a Kickstarter to raise money to buy a new roaster.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because I roasted so much coffee for him that my roaster caught on fire. As it turns out, that's not an unusual thing to happen to a coffee roaster, because they are very hot.
Ah.
And like one of the biggest liability insurance issues in coffee roasting is you might have a fire. I did have a fire. It was luckily not as damaging as it could have been. It's a good
Wow.
thing I know this. So, just over the course of that, he donated all sorts of like special operations equipment, giveaways that I could give as extras to the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And their gear is pretty top notch, so that was a huge boost.
Yeah, it
Went
really
on
is.
all his social networks. He's like, support Nicole, and they did.
Oh, wow.
So, as a result of that, I am very thankful to John Willis, right?
Yeah.
And he was throwing, after 2020 happened and all the weird, I think it was 2021 that he threw a party, and he hadn't had a party in a while. And he's like, well, you should come out and maybe sell some coffee. So I brought, a crate of coffee, and I get in there. They throw up a table for me. I make coffee. I sell coffee. I drank 19 cups of coffee, and it turned out that Nicole on cocaine is a lot like Nicole on coffee. Actually, I don't know what Nicole on cocaine is like, but I was pretty hyper on that much coffee. I drank a lot of coffee that day, and I talked very fast the whole day.
Yeah.
But he was like, I just spent from waking until late at night showing everybody my aquaponics system and how I'm raising these animals and all this stuff. He's like, Nicole, maybe we should do an event here. And then, like John Willis, he walked away. He planted a seed, is what he did. And I thought about that for a while and came back to him and I said, and when he said it, I think he meant like, I'll hire you to put on an event here, because he had, I guess he'd seen me do other events. And I came back to him and I said, it doesn't make sense to me to do an event that doesn't pay for itself. So I need to know how much you want for the facility and how in are you. And this is what I propose we do. And we set up like a form on my website where people could apply to show us how to do something. And then we put it out to both our networks. And the first Self Reliance Festival, we had about 150 people.
I was there.
Yeah. You saw. And we had like the pole barn in the garage, right?
Yeah.
And then the next one we had like 300 people. And then the next one we had 500 people. And it just kept growing. And that was because what we found was like that overlapping of, there were more homesteaders in my network and sort of more tactical dudes in his network, tactical preppers.
Yeah.
That overlap has been really helpful because now we have tactical preppers on homesteads and homesteaders who know how to defend themselves and medically intervene when there's a problem.
That's super important. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Have you seen what a Muscovy can do to your wrist if you don't wear long sleeves?
No.
I have. Good thing I didn't bleed out that day.
Wow.
Didn't hit my artery, but I got a big old, and I was like, I remember Jack Spirko saying wear sleeves when you like clip their wings, and now I know, and I'm just looking at my vein right there going, that could have been bad.
Ooh, dang. It's something that gets neglected to think about, is what are you going to do if you have an emergency medical situation and you're kind of far away from hospitals and stuff like that. It was not something that I really thought about until a friend of mine got me to go over to Camden for some training.
Yeah. Have you taken their medical class?
No, I took one of their rifle training courses, but during that, they were like, you got to get immediate action medical. So
yeah, I did I've only done the medical so far, and I'm glad I did, because it got me over a mental hurdle of when somebody's hurt and you have to intervene, you actually cause them more pain sometimes.
Yeah.
But you save their life. And their pain is not my problem. That was the big thing I learned. Your pain is not my problem. Keeping you alive is my problem right now.
Right.
And that's hard for me because I have great empathy for pain. And that's been an issue with animals on the homestead too. It's like, I don't want to touch the wound. Well, my dog would be dead if I hadn't kept her wound clean for 4 months last year. And that didn't feel good, I'm sure.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, speaking of that, with this, the Self Reliance Festival is upcoming in March 25th, I believe.
It's March 25th and 26th, which is about a week and a half. Tickets are at selfreliancefestival.com.
Yeah.
And if you can't make it to Camden, but you should make it to Camden if you can, there are digital tickets too.
Yeah, I'm super cool. It's super cool that you guys are doing the digital event as well. That's great. I wasn't able to get to that last one.
Yeah.
But are you guys doing any kind of special workshops? I thought that I heard something about maybe Bear Tactical doing a special workshop before the event or something like that.
Bear Independent on the 24th.
Bear Independent.
They're doing. He has a company called Refuge Medical that does emergency medical training. Same thing. Keep people alive. Well, they have like keep people alive, and I believe they go through Now What, or I'm not sure if they go through Now What now, but I know that we have somebody on site who's going to talk about what do you do after you've stopped the bleeding for the next 3 weeks with this person. Because that's important too, right? If you can't get them to a hospital. But the training we're doing is sort of that initial emergency intervention. And the cost is $425, includes lunch. And we have about 5 seats left right now in Friday afternoon's class. So that's classes from 1 to 5, lunch is from 12 to 1.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah, I mean, it's it's something you really don't, like I said, you really don't think about, but like it's like one of the most necessary skills that you should have really to be able to respond to something in an emergency, especially if you are going to be, shooting rifles and stuff. You should know
Yeah,
how to take action to help save somebody if you have to.
yeah. And even if you don't have to, even if they're not going to die, you can make them more comfortable, or you can make the problem less bad on the
Hmm.
way to the hospital. Because I know we've been in the emergency room here. We went 3 times last year,
Oh
uh,
wow.
with tactical with blood. Like he kept messing up his finger, and I was always like, "Is this the time I have to put stitches in tactical?" It never was. Uh, but it was sort of like, okay, grab these things and then go, as opposed to just go and bleed all over the car or whatever else one would have done in the past.
Yeah. I remember talking to somebody at when I went up to Camden for James Yeager's celebration of life party,
Yeah,
and I got to meet a few emergency medics,
yeah,
and they were telling me that the entire hospital system is like barely functioning.
yeah,
And they're like super overworked, and the hospitals don't care about these guys, and they're just pushing them to the brink basically.
yeah. It can be very dysfunctional. I'm surprised. I get very frustrated with the medical system. At the
Yeah.
same time, I understand, like, we put our doctors and nurses under a lot of unnecessary stress. And I think the system is set up to do that on purpose.
Yeah.
You put them under stress, you weed out the bad ones.
Hmm.
Well, the problem is we have, people on shifts who've been working for days straight,
Yeah.
making
Yeah.
decisions about our health, and that just does not seem like a good idea.
Yeah. You would want somebody with a really clear mind, and
Yeah, I'd like my freshly rested nurse, please.
yeah, I can't remember what podcast I was listening to, but it was somebody in the medical field that they were saying that sometimes, they'll leave surgical equipment in your body after a
Yeah.
surgery and stuff like that. And it's just because these guys are so overworked and everything. Um, so I wanted to get into a little bit about you mentioned your coffee roasting business. Why do you like coffee so much?
Because it's delicious.
Yeah.
That's it. I started drinking coffee in Portland, Oregon. Stereotypical, I know. And I went to Europe for a while, and they had pretty good coffee there. And came back to Portland, and there's just all these great craft roasters there. Then I moved to Tennessee, and I like arrived to this coffee roaster desert. And I think it's because it's hotter here. And so the last thing on your mind on a 95 hot humid day in Nashville, Tennessee is, you know what I want right now? I want
Nice.
a mocha, nice hot mocha. That doesn't, I mean, it probably happens now, but I've always been somebody who drinks hot beverages on hot days. I'm a weirdo. When I moved here, there were some craft roasters. I didn't really find them. And I kept, whenever I go home to Oregon to visit, I would come back with a suitcase of coffee. And then one day I ran out of coffee. And I went to Walmart, and you know what they had? Starbucks. So I bought Starbucks. Do you know what Starbucks tastes like?
Uh,
Ass. It tastes like ass. Because I was like, well, this sucks. And so I started researching roasting, and I started roasting. And the more I roasted coffee, the more I loved coffee.
hmm.
And the more I learned about it, the more it's like one of those things, you think you know a lot about coffee, and then you get into the coffee business and you realize how much you don't know about coffee. And then the more you learn about coffee, the more you realize you really don't know about coffee, but
Yeah.
it's fascinating to me.
Okay.
So I just really like how it tastes. I remember one time in my life where I was having some heart issues, and he said that the heart doctor said, stop having caffeine. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went off caffeine for a month.
How did you do on that?
I did fine. It didn't stop the heart problem. Came back and I'm like, it didn't start the heart problem. He's like, I want to put you on statins. And I was like,
Mm.
how about I give alcohol up for a month and we'll see. That was the same month I quit my job and started just doing the podcast. So
Ah, okay.
made that change and the heart problem stopped. Also stopped drinking wine and the heart problem stopped. I was super relieved that I didn't have to give up coffee.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow.
I still drink alcohol, but I don't drink like I used to. But I think the stress of the job was more to do with the issue than anything, and alcohol was exacerbating it. Red wine in particular. So
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that is really important. I mean, when you're constantly stressed, your body cannot heal itself, and if you're doing something that you really hate and you're just
yeah,
dreading doing it every day, that it's just gonna deteriorate your health faster and faster. So, it really is good to find something that you don't hate to do every day.
it makes a huge difference. I've had some dental issues this year, which caused pain,
Mm-hmm.
and my weight loss stopped. And it wasn't because I was eating a lot of chocolate or something. And I was like, well, that's interesting. I wasn't eating, as good as usual, but it wasn't that bad. And sort of like 3 days after the final chapter of all the mouth things, I started losing weight again.
Hmm.
And I thought, I wonder how much of that like body hanging on to it is like my body was just panicked about all that in the mouth. I don't know.
Hmm.
But it was interesting to me when that happened.
Yes. So, one of the questions that I wanted to ask you was, so do you remember like one of the hardest struggles you had to go through, and like how did you get through it? Like, a lot of folks, are going through tough times, especially now with the whole uh, you know, financial system looking like it's having some issues. So, you know, was there a time in your life where you kind of felt like the situation was insurmountable, and how did you get through that?
It's a very hard question to ask only because there was not one. So I'm going to ask a clarifying question.
Okay.
What kind of situation do you mean? Do you mean financial? Do you mean emotional? Like,
Let's say like financial.
okay. Yeah. I've had more than one time in my life that my finances have been a mess because I did not develop financial literacy despite my father trying to get me to develop it and develop it. So I did typical thing, some student debt. I went to college in the 90s, so the scale of my debt was nothing like what kids get now, right? Mine was paid off in 5 years. Um but I developed a habit in college, late college, of instant gratification with the credit card.
Hmm.
And so at some point, and I was on Jack's show about this a little bit because when I became a 5 year overnight success, a big thing I've been doing is paying off debt as part of that. Before I even listened to Jack's show, though, I realized, crap, I have a lot of debt. I think I didn't even know what I had. I just knew that I was constantly juggling bills, and if anything went wrong, I was not going to make one. So the
Hmm.
good news is nothing went wrong at that point. If I would have had a medical condition or I don't even know what, job loss,
Any unforeseen thing?
any unforeseen, totally normal thing, I would have been in big trouble. And I remember when I just had this feeling that something wasn't right, didn't even know how much money I owed. And at that point, I mean, I had managed to buy property in all this. I
Wow.
sat down and I got every bill out and I wrote it all down on a piece of paper a lot like that. But that's not what that is, but and I wrote down just balances, minimum payments, interest rates, and how much interest I was paying every month. And I ended up at the end of that, separate from mortgages, I 40-ish thousand dollars in consumer debt.
Hmm.
And I think trying to remember how much I was paying a month in, I was paying more than a third, but less than 50% of my monthly income in interest
To serve it.
only.
Oh, wow.
Only interest. And I cried
Yeah.
because I was like, well, this isn't good. And I'm glad I did it. But that was, I think a lot of times we end up in a situation financially like that because we're in denial about what's going on. We're using instant gratification to, or the credit card to make ourselves feel better. And then we feel worse because we spent even more money. And then we use the card, you get into the cycle and you don't really know what's going on. And the worst thing you can do is look that little demon right in the face because it's going to look right back at you. It's going to look a lot like you. And so anybody who ever comes to me is like, what do? I do say, I'm like, just, you need to write it all down. It'll be hard. You might cry. It's okay. Once you write it down, you can choose where to start. And you can't choose where to start until you write it all down.
Hmm.
And continuing to be in denial just digs the hole deeper and deeper and deeper to where you end up getting Social Security that gets garnished to pay debt in your old age, and then you can't work. And you don't want to be there. So, your dreams of being a multimillionaire, you may or may not reach those dreams. But what you don't have to be is completely destitute if you will just write it all down. Um, and then from there, I took lots of steps to pay it off. I started by stopping the bleeding, making significant changes in my life, but I also learned how to properly play the rolling credit card game.
Hmm.
Do you know what that is?
No.
So this is not for beginners, but you get all these offers for 0%, right?
Yeah.
And it's a 3% transfer fee. If you have a 21% debt,
Right.
you can roll it, you pay 3%, which is, out of, you're paying 21% a year. So it's not like, so that 3% is like, whatever, uh, like 2.5 months of interest
Okay.
on that 21%. So you roll it over and then you'll have it there for 18 months and you just pay it down. So what happens is
Oh, at
you
a
keep
different interest rate.
paying at you keep paying what you were paying there on this one and it's paying principal down. The risk of this game, and why it's more of an advanced skill is once that one's at zero.
Doesn't it start to do like an adjustable or something?
No, once the one no once no, the right. If you go over zero, it goes back up really high if you
Yeah,
don't get
yeah.
it paid off in that period of time. The one you just paid off, you can now use it to buy shit.
Oh, true.
That's why they send you those. So, the only way to successfully play this game, and you have to really trust yourself not to buy things with that other card or pay for an emergency medical situation with that other card, you gotta get rid of that other card.
Yeah.
Or freeze it or whatever. I had a drawer. It's actually this drawer right here. I would just throw it in this drawer and forget it existed and close the drawer. That worked for me. That does not work for everybody. Um,
Hmm.
but in that way, I paid off a lot very quickly. And
Wow.
I paid off debt at a time where my income went from, $80,000 to about $20,000
Whoa. Wow.
from one year to the next.
Wow.
But I live in the country in a $75,000 house. So my mortgage is,
Yeah.
pretty low. Yeah.
Well, if somebody is in this situation now, I talk to people that are in the cities, and I try to say, if you can get out of the city, you should try to for a place to reduce your expenses. I just talked to, I was over at a friend's this weekend and was talking to one of his buddies, and he recently moved from Chicago down to Alabama, and the living expenses, in comparison, is crazy. He could let his wife stay at home and
That's awesome.
have the income to move in down where a place where it's less expensive. So what was your process in finding your land like? How did you go through that?
I wish I could tell you there was this whole methodical thing I did, and I took my time and looked for features I wanted and all that. That's not what happened.
Okay.
I was in Nashville, and we'd come out here to the lake to go fishing, and I like to go swimming. And we thought, well, you know, we're spending money out here, spending the night. Let's buy something. So we were looking for a hillbilly fishing shack. This place was listed as land only because the house was so trashed.
Hmm.
And it was just like it was bad. I have no idea why I liked this place, but I loved the land. And
Okay.
so ended up doing kind of a lowball offer. They countered $1,000 higher, bought the house. I was actually surprised there was even a house on the property. And
Wow.
I was still living in Nashville and just loved it out here so much. Like I had better neighbors out here. I was relaxed out here. I liked it out here. And going back to the city was a stress every time. And I just thought, you know what? Screw it. Let's move out here. And when we moved out here, I had only managed to get running water to the kitchen sink. So taking a bath was like carting hot water from the kitchen sink to the bathtub till we got the plumb. I had to redo the whole plumbing system. Like it was a mess. But I
Wow.
didn't care. I didn't care. So I went from like totally urban convenience person to I'm in the middle of nowhere learning how to run a well system. I had done a lot of remodeling at that point, so I had some skills and some knowledge of electricity.
Okay.
No knowledge of plumbing. I know a lot more about plumbing now.
Okay.
Yeah. If you want to work on skills, guys, for living in the country, learn plumbing and electrical. Just start there. And then realize you can apply electrical, like standard electrical to 12 volt. You're going to be like, if you want to go off grid, then you'll finally understand how all that stuff works. It's great.
Okay. So basically, it was just the bones of the building, I guess, when you found it, or was it not even that?
It was, it had, so the house is built into a hillside. The south facing wall is 12 inches thick for passive solar, and there used to be a greenhouse there.
Oh, so it was like kind of set up to be a off-grid kind of place.
I think so. It was tied into the power, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The guy who built this thought a lot about not wasting energy.
Okay.
And when I got here, he had died in the house. Somebody else had owned it for a decade, and they had pulled out the greenhouse by shattering all the glass. So there was just broken glass everywhere.
Hmm.
And they had not they had started to replace it with an overhang that they had not finished. So it was just sort of like posts in the ground but no roof. And then there was an HVAC system that had been put on retrofitted on the front of the house, and the ducting was like an octopus on the outside of the house.
Yeah.
And it, we joke it looked like a cruise missile had hit it. I actually have a picture of it in my smart home setting presentation. It's like this is what the house looked like when I bought it. And there's like literally there's gutters and there's plants growing out of the gutters.
Yeah.
It looked terrible. And there was garbage everywhere and there were tools like socket sets and stuff in the weeds that had grown up over the weeds. So to this day,
Yeah.
on 3.2 acres, stuff comes out of the ground and comes out of the underbrush, even though I've had goats on this property and I've been here for 16 years. I walked up to the house the other day. There was a hook I'm holding my arms up, about that big around, a hook, an iron hook leaned up against my house. I'm like, so tactical. I got a question for you. He goes, what? I'm like, no, just there's the iron hook right there. Where'd that come from? And he explained exactly where he was on the property, where he found just this like tiny piece of metal sticking out of the ground. So I started digging it out, and it was like this big hook underground. That so that's still
like
happening.
a sailing anchor or something like that.
I don't even know. No, it wasn't. It's a round hook. I'll get a picture of it at some point. But
Wow.
I was just like, why do we still have the hook? He's like, I don't know. I just put it there.
I don't know. It's kind of neat.
It was like somebody welded it for some. It had a purpose, I'm sure, but
Wow.
that was probably Mr. Cruz who built the house.
Wow, that's interesting.
He used a giant hook for something. And it was round. It's like round. It's like whoop and then ends and it's pointy. And it has a little loop here and it's pointy.
Huh. So when you got started there, were you like staying in Nashville and then driving and fixing things up, or did you just go all in and just head out there and just start working on things?
First thing I did is put a deck on the front of the house so you didn't have to walk through mud and broken glass to get in the front door. And built a screened-in porch because I was sure mosquitoes were going to be a problem, and they're not. That was a waste. Um, and then that was done weekend warrior style, and I didn't intend to move here full time at that point. Bought it in July. By December, I did move here, and that's when I was still working on uncovering the water.
Hmm.
I didn't know how to maintain a well system, and you know the well system was something I had to learn about, and it was also strangely maintained. So things had broken. What happens in the country, guys, is you learn how things work, and then they break, and then you fix them. And sometimes it's Sunday, and there's no hardware store out here open on Sunday. So you fix it with what you have, and what they apparently had were um, water hoses from cars and hose clamps. So there was just stuff like that instead of actual approved plumbing.
Yeah.
And those sorts of things are not designed to have 60 psi through them.
Right.
And so, I would fix something and I'd be like, yes, it works. And something else would blow off and I'd just like get a face full of water. And I'd be like, oh, that's a radiator hose. I feel like maybe we should put, it was mostly PVC. There's some PVC back there and get the proper fittings and be done with it. And the whole system was full of sand because there is sand in the ground that comes up out of my well and gets into the system if you don't fill it. I had to learn all of those things. And I loved it. It was really fun learning it. Other people would have hated it though, because what that meant is every time it broke, you didn't have water.
Yeah. So
And I
you're
had learned
com-
about septic systems. That's a whole nother thing. Yeah.
so you were coming out there on the weekends and just
Yeah.
fixing things as you could and getting things done. Were you spending like the whole weekend out there just camping out and getting things done?
Yeah. Yeah. Did
Wow.
that for 6 months and then moved here and did that every weekend and during the week too after that.
Oh wow. You currently have I saw that you had some videos on your bathroom remodel going on and you were
Yeah.
showing some of the progress on that. I think the last one I saw was like you had torn it down to the 2x4 boards and all that. So how's that project going?
Okay, the bathroom's back together. I need to do trim work in there.
Okay.
There's a new window. The joists have as it turns out, I just found out this year that my house is built on 2x4 joists. And if you know anything about home construction, you know that those aren't joists. Those are 2x4s.
Yeah.
Because of how my house is built, there is not an option to change that in the bathroom. So now it's built on 4x4 joists with a lot of bracing. Um, Maybe you haven't seen, but I decided to change my kitchen counters this year too.
Oh yeah. I
Yeah.
haven't seen that yet.
No, so yeah, this was a great idea. I was going to change my counters, and while I was at it, I was like, you know what? Let's just kind of pull the lower cabinets out, see if there's a rot problem because the floor is not has never been level in my kitchen.
Oh.
So, you know why it wasn't level? Because my joists are 2x4s, and 2x4s aren't joists.
Ah.
But the
Okay.
good news there was enough clearance to put 2x6s in,
Okay.
and we had Ken Esch come out and deal with the structural issue. And I ended up, my house is built out of cinder blocks,
Yeah.
and
So is
I've
everything
seen
sitting
them
on?
now. So we were gutted to the dirt and to the cinder blocks in the in a third of my house,
So everything's just sitting on some cinder
just gone.
blocks.
In the middle of my living room are boxes of things that used to be in my kitchen,
Oh my gosh.
and everybody in the network has pretty much helped me on this at this point. I have paid for help. I've had people volunteer to help. Um, so new joists done. All of the drains have been rerun because the drains were going uphill at the very end.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if you know this about drains and shit.
You don't want to have that
It does
going up.
not flow uphill.
No.
Just throwing that one out there.
Yeah. You want.
So that's been fixed, and it's today. Today I have in my kitchen space subfloor and a framed wall, and drywall is hung on that wall. Mudding and
Nice.
taping is not done. And while it was open, we ran. We had Matt out, who's an electrician in the network, and we ran circuits to the kitchen because I do these events.
Right.
And so here's what happens at an event at the Holler Homestead. Nicole, where can I run the extension cord from so I can run 2 roasting ovens at the same time? What's on a different circuit, right? That's gone now.
Ah.
So it's like circuit, circuit, circuit. Okay, you guys are good.
So.
And my mud room, where the laundry room is, also ripped down to the soil, and the drains are also redone. And while I was there, I ripped out this little bathroom I had just redone 3 years ago, which was just a toilet and a sink. And we plumbed it to add a shower that will have a bench that, because I have a clawfoot tub in my bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
So if I have mobility problems, I can just walk into the shower for a shower.
Yeah.
And so, there's the tub and then there's the shower. That'll be really cool. But that is like, it's just going to have the subfloor in there with the laundry room working again. And then it's all in the kitchen till the kitchen's done. But the kitchen also is not going to be finished all the way just from a bud. So this is my debt mindset, right? I'm not going into debt over this project.
Right.
Which means I'm going to have painted floors. Instead of cabinets, I'm going to have restaurant work tables that I got from Websteront.
Oh, okay.
And a temporary bar where the sink is going to be made out of plywood and 2x4s, holding the sink up and stained. Because I want really awesome cabinets.
Yeah.
And if I just buy like the cheap stuff at Lowe's, it falls apart in about 3 years.
Right.
Right. And it'll still cost me over $1,000 to get that. So I was like, okay, we'll just do it this way. I've got everything I need. Countertops, I can put things in bins underneath that. It'll be fine. And I can save up the money to pay the person I want to use real wood to make real wood cabinets so that they do not rot. Because those like pressboard things are terrible.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Those things fall apart. And
So the
get
bathroom was
chipped.
supposed to be easy, wasn't easy. And then the kitchen was supposed to be easy, wasn't easy. And as a result of this, my next plan is to get into the living room, but not till I've saved up money because that's not going to be easy either. We're going to have to replace all the joists in that too.
Oh my goodness.
So
Dang.
that'll be like a year or 2 down the road. We'll do that.
Yeah. You find that like when you don't just reach for the credit card to you want to like pay it off or whatever, you get a little bit more creative on how you're like sourcing materials and
Yeah.
different things like that.
Yeah. So I'm sourcing countertops. My countertops ultimately will be fairly thick cut wood from a guy in our network who mills wood.
Mm-hmm.
And I reached out to him. I don't know how much I'm paying for those yet, but he'll tell me when he's done.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "Oh, I guess I better get working on them." Then no, because I'm gonna have stainless steel work tables until I can build the cabinet. So I don't need the counters yet. So that was just a local sourcing thing. Somebody reached out to me when she saw I was doing drywall and told me she had 15 pieces of drywall I could have. And I was like, that's great, because when I do the living room, I need those. You know,
Yeah.
I already bought the drywall for this, but great. So some things I'm just going to buy what I'm going to buy. Like the subfloor, I bought the most moisture resistant thing I could buy at the hardware store I go to. And I wasn't going to mess around with creative subfloor because I already have, like, the soil is right there. But other things I will get creative on. And you can do a lot with what you have. Like in my bathroom, we found this shelf in my workshop.
Okay.
That looks like crap. And I'm going to paint it white. It's going to look great. I'm going to put it in there. It's the perfect size. I was like, online, I'm like, I could order shelves. We could make shelves. Tactical's like, what size do you need? And I told him, he's like, oh, I saw an old wooden shelf down there that's about that size. I was like, perfect. Repurpose that.
Nice.
So as long as it doesn't smell bad, I'll do it.
Yeah. So, with you and the podcast and the whole hauler community, are you kind of the central point of the people like to they'll gather at your area, or do people like kind of go to different people's places, or how does it are you kind of like the central point, or how does that work?
This is built to be the central point, and I am a bit of an introvert, so I tend to prefer people to visit me versus going to visit other people.
Okay.
It's just part of my nature. I will go visit other people, but I get very uncomfortable doing that. So I do it limited. And so just naturally, I'm always like, hey, I'll cook a bit. And I cook food. So, food always draws people in.
That definitely is the way to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And people know they can just stop by here. Like, well, when we first started recording, somebody walked into my house. I have no idea who it was. I know it wasn't Tactical. It might have been Nighthawk, or it might have been Steve, because like Steve has been popping down just to check out the progress on the walls.
Oh, okay.
He did we framed the wall that we had to frame this weekend 3 times before we got it right. He did the final framing.
Oh, okay.
Of the wall. That's the other thing about doing it yourself. It's like you do stuff 2-3 times sometimes to get it right.
Right.
So I don't know who it was, and that's not unusual. People hear that and they freak out. It's like, well, people who know they can come over know A, what time of day they can come over, and B, they know who they are.
Right.
So it's not just like everybody drops in. So that happens. But since the Eversouls have moved in, Steve and Tracy are really gracious hosts and hostesses, and so we've started doing things over there too.
Oh, okay.
So like this weekend, they helped with the kitchen project. And then I was cooking shepherd's pie, and Tracy does this. She's like, I'm cleaning my freezer out. That means, there's going to be a whole bunch of delicious this and that at my house, which is a great time to come visit them. And she was doing wings. And I was like, great. So do you want to do dinner together? And if that's the case, are we doing it at your house? Because we probably shouldn't do it at my house because it's all ripped up. And she's like, great idea, Nicole. So we went down there. But
okay.
and at Christmas, was it Christmas? Yeah, Christmas, they had us over. That was really fun. So there's been a little bit of back and forth.
Oh, okay. Getting to the recent things that have been going on with people talking about having issues with their chickens laying eggs and everything like that. Has that affected you? And what did you have you done anything to solve that? Or has it affected you?
Mm-mm. My ducks did stop laying this year. My ducks stop laying every year. And we did change their feed to the Tractor Supply feed for a bag. But I don't usually use that feed. It might have been 2 bags. But our feed source that gives me the soy-free feed in Tennessee stopped producing it. And
okay.
So, like, thank God for Tractor Supply and having feed. So then we bought that feed. But for me to say it was the feed in December when my ducks aren't laying anyway, it's hard for me to commit to that. I have seen some compelling arguments that their feed has a selenium deficit, I think it was, and that it might be leading to that. So I'm not going to say it's not possible.
Okay.
I am going to say you shouldn't be feeding your poultry Tractor Supply feed if you can find another source. You
Okay.
should find a local quality source of feed for your poultry. So we had already moved back to another source, and they're laying eggs just fine.
Okay.
Like as normal, as the days have gotten longer, they're laying eggs.
Yeah. So some of the guys in our group, I guess they were wondering if I guess they had heard that you were getting it from somewhere in Alabama or something like that.
No, I got it in Kentucky. I looked at a feed source in Alabama. I can't remember who it was because I want soy free. I'm more worried about soy free than organic because I'm allergic to soy. So I looked at a source in Alabama and couldn't feasibly get the feed here, and they were using fish protein instead of soy. And
Okay.
fish protein adds a flavor to the meat that I don't care for.
Gives it
So
kind of a
I
fishy
was
flavor.
trying, yeah, it gives it a fishy flavor. To me, I'm a super taster. I taste things other people don't taste.
Hmm.
Most people don't taste this. I taste this. So I have been looking for a source of feed that doesn't have the fish in it for long term. And I haven't found it yet. I found another, like Steve Eversole just showed me in Woodbury. There's a feed store that brings in that sort of a national soy free feed that I'll try. I tried coffee feed in Kentucky, KOFFI. It's Kentucky Organic Feeds something Inc. KOFFI. Excuse me. They do soy free. I've been trying not to cough in your mic for this whole interview.
Oh,
Um,
oh, you're good.
yeah, it's just this cold. Um, they don't put soy in, but they do use soy oil, and so uh, that's not my long term source. But I think it's better than Tractor Supply. So
Huh. So I one of the guys that was at one of the past Self Reliance festivals, Billy Bond. I was really interested in what he had to talk about
yeah.
with his ways of sourcing feed for his chickens,
Mm-hmm.
which was going to local restaurants and figuring out a way that you can work with them to get some feed from them. So
To
uh,
compost it.
to compost it, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's the key. So yeah, I mean, it's you get talking about getting creative, it's finding
Yeah.
solutions, and
If
that's what
you
I love about you, Nicole, is that I mean, you're finding solutions. You're figuring out. You're talking to people about solutions. Like, okay, there's all these problems going on in the world, but like, what can you do to take action to like figure it out, right? Like, how can
well,
I solve that problem?
you cannot you cannot change what people in power do. All you can change is your reaction to it. And so if I let my reaction to the war in Ukraine or SVB going bankrupt or any of those things stop my personal progress or progress for our community, then I am letting them make me fail.
Yeah.
And and that may seem like overly simplistic and overly optimistic. Dude, I have failed so many times and I will fail again. But if I didn't try and failed, that was way worse than if I tried and failed.
Good
Because when you
point.
try
Yeah.
and fail, you're like, oh, yeah, that didn't work. Huh. Okay, I won't do it that way again. And when you don't try and fail, you don't know why you failed, except for that you didn't try.
That
So
that
that's why this
that
banking,
that's
I
a
had John Pugliano on
that's a big
today
key.
because I was
Yeah.
like, we have to have perspective about this and not freak out and put all of our wealth into a pile of silver in our basement. Like that's not is that pile of silver going to move you forward in 10 years? Because if not, figure out how you're moving forward in 10 years. And Billy Bond's tapping of waste streams to feed livestock is brilliant. as long as there's a waste stream.
There is so much food
And there
waste
is
in this
so
country.
much food waste. It's crazy how much food we have.
I when I was in college, I went to go. I worked at Disney World for a little while, and just worked as a janitor there.
Hmm.
And just seeing the amount of food that gets thrown away at Disney World, it could feed like tons of people over and over again. It's
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah.
So,
We've talked about producing rabbit feed here, getting a pelletizer and making rabbit feed because that's another source of, like they can eat grass, but they need some vitamins. So
oh,
like just
okay.
learning how that works, or breeding rabbits to so that they only go to grass would be great, but we haven't gotten there yet, and we're still using outside feed. So it's like, okay, is there a way we can work with homesteaders in our area to get what we need to make the rabbit feed that we need? We'll see. My sheep live on grass, and that's kind of cool. That's
Yeah,
why I like my sheep a lot.
yeah. Yeah, rabbits. I didn't know that they can't. They couldn't just live on the grass. I guess you gotta supplement them with some kind of minerals or something.
They need to have pasture. So that's a bit of a misnomer on grass, right? When I say it, somebody was arguing with me. I was like, okay, they're eating fescue and clover and plantain, and I'm giving them leaves from the mulberry tree excuse me, tree. And so it's not just grass. But figuring out how that works now while I still have feed to keep them healthy if I screw it up is super important.
Okay. I've been thinking about raising rabbits, but I've never raised them before. But I've got buddies. My one of my family's friends, they have rabbits, but they just let them free range, and then they just grab a rabbit when they want one. I guess I don't
Hey,
know.
that works.
Yeah. So I guess it can't be that. It can't be too
We can
difficult.
we cannot free range rabbits in my house because I have dogs. You know what my dogs like to eat?
Rabbits, I
Rabbits.
guess.
Yeah, they love rabbits.
Yeah, that's what John Willis was talking about. He just raises the rabbits purely to feed his dogs, I guess, or
Hmm.
mostly, I guess. So, um, so yeah, I wanted to ask this question because I know I've experienced it myself, kind of going through, a lot of these things that we've been talking about. You know how you kind of figure out that the world is not as you thought, and maybe some more people are getting to that point in their life, and they're a little overwhelmed by everything that's going on. Um, did you ever experience that? Maybe you felt like you were totally alone, and you were like, "Am I the only one thinking this way?" Or, um, you know, uh, what? There's all this stuff going on in the world. Like, how do I navigate to the next step in my life, or the next little piece that I'm gonna work on?
Well, when it became clear to me in 2020 that we were mimicking what happened in Germany before Hitler took over
Mm-hmm.
in propaganda, um, I I had some moments of, holy crap, it really is happening here. Because I had seen it coming, but I was like, is this the one? Is this the time that I should have left the country and I didn't, and now I'm stuck here with the terrible regime? And what I did, because I had a very dark moment then,
Hmm.
and I have this podcast and I have these listeners. It is not my job to freak them out, especially like I could see the pattern, but I can't promise you it's going to happen. And then if I get on my podcast and very irresponsibly say this is how bad it is, and people leave the country and then it doesn't happen,
Yeah.
that's not responsible. So I called a friend and I said, "Talk me off this cliff." "What cliff is it, Nicole?" And I explained what was going on. I'm like, "Do you see it?" And he's like, "Yeah, you got to make some decisions, Nicole. You have to decide who can come to the holler and who can't. and you have to communicate with those people so it's clear because everybody's going to want to come to the hauler. You have to decide the parameters under which that can happen. If you want to increase your security, food security, you need to think now. It's springtime. You need to think now about what you're going to plant. You need to plant a lot of sweet potatoes. You need to take every sweet potato slip that comes out of that ground and put it next to it and make another sweet potato slip because those things are easy to grow and those carb calories are easy. And then he said, you need to not watch the news and you need to focus on how you can build your business. Because the stronger your business is through all of this, the better source you're going to be. And once
Yeah.
you do that, you're going to find you don't have time to freak out about it. And I was like, he was right. And I was like, yep, I just needed some tangible steps to do. I did decide we increased security here and we got more purposeful about security. I mean, what I found out is that some of my hauler neighbors were more purposeful about security than I had ever been.
Okay.
I got looped in. Um,
I gotcha.
and then I was like, we got to grow more food. We have to be like, my pantry has always been methodically organized. The distance between pantry full and pantry empty got much bigger in 2020. I was like, how about a 12-month rolling pantry? That would be better than like a 3-month rolling pantry. By the end of 2022, I mostly don't need to buy things at the grocery store because they're coming from, not everything though. I mean, I had to buy cheese this year. That's one of my things. I want to get to where I don't have to buy cheese, but I really like cheese and I just haven't made enough cheese.
I do too, yeah. And you gotta
Yeah.
have some space for a cow or a milking cow, but I
Yeah,
guess
I'm
you
not
could.
doing that.
I guess you could do. I guess you could do it with goats.
Mm-hmm. I actually get milk from a guy named what is it? It's Orchard Creamery. So I learned about them because I met this really cool freedom cat named Bradley, and his daughter runs the cow side. He runs the goat side, but they do raw milk, herd shares. So I have a herd share.
Okay.
That's how I get my milk. That means I don't have to milk a cow.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that is just, I don't know. It's weird because all that stuff is going on. So now when something happens, like the bank default,
Yeah. That's what I was
the
gonna ask. Is if
first thing I think is, who can I call who knows more about this than I do? Because I already know what I'm finding on the internet is total bull. And I managed to dig into that far, like before the media filters really kicked in on that. I was able to read about what was going on.
Yeah.
For about 12 hours. And then all that stuff disappeared off the internet. Which is disturbing. That's more disturbing to me than that bank defaulting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they probably want to prevent some kind of bank run from happening.
They want to prevent runs on banks. Well, guess what? They didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some people ran to some banks, and it's not the kind of run on bank that they have had, historically we hear about, right?
Yeah.
Some people have gone to some banks. The unfortunate thing is I need to go to the bank and take out a bunch of cash to give as change at Self Reliance Festival this week. So I'm going to look like I'm running on the bank. Not really.
Yeah.
I need $500 in fives, please. And $300 in ones. That's what they're going to get from me.
But
darn you, timing.
But since you did all that, in 2020, or do you feel like you're in a better position now that you kind of?
I'm in a better position, but not impenetrable, right? Like,
right, yeah.
There are still outside inputs that come in to make this place function.
Yeah.
Can we do without them? Sure. Will things be different? Yes.
Well,
very.
Well, I think the great thing is the community aspect because, nobody can be a lone wolf, and that's something I've kind of learned is I've always been, kind of an outsider type of guy and kind of wanted to do stuff on my own, but once you start, really trying to get after some stuff, you realize how many holes you have in your own self-reliance,
Yeah, that's part of what the Self Reliance Festival is intended to do is we want
Connect
to
people.
network people, we want to connect people, but the one of the things that happens there every time is there's a subset of people, maybe 20%, it could be as high as 20%, who come there because they're freaked out.
Yeah.
And they leave there less freaked out. And every person that we can make less freaked out and more empowered to go do one good thing for themselves is a success, because that is more people who are realizing they can take steps to take care of themselves, their families, their communities. They can develop relationships that are actually strong relationships and not just panic relationships. And all of that makes more people stronger, which makes our entire culture more resilient when things go wrong.
Yeah.
So, every additional 100 people we get there are 100 more people who are more resilient a year from now. And they've influenced another 100 people, and it builds. And that's why Self Reliance Festival, my homesteading workshop, there's the Midwest Preparedness Project. They have an event coming up in April. All of these things that are happening, John Bush's Exit and Build Land Summit. Every time people aren't afraid at the end of one of these things and they go do something, it's one less person who, if the ball drops, isn't like, I don't know what to do next. They know what to do next.
Yeah.
M- Things may not be easy. Like, I do think the economy is going through a recession and things are not going to be easy.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you have to roll over and die.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So, there were people during the Great Depression that pulled up their bootstrings and just said, I'm gonna figure out a way of making it and making something, and then came out of it like great on the other side.
Hmm.
So there is a lot of opportunity there,
There is.
to fill the gaps where the systems are failing, and if you can step in with some kind of value for other people, then there's a really good opportunity. And like I think I was listening to Jack's show the other day where he was basically just saying like get it done,
Just get it done. Find your tribe. That's the other thing.
do
Find your
do
tribe.
something, just do something.
Yeah. When you find your tribe, I have found my tribe, right? My tribe wasn't necessarily who I was born into, although they are part of my tribe. But my tribe's all around me in the Holler Neighbors. It's all around me in the LFTN network, and it's becoming the SRF world. When you have a tribe and one tribal person needs help, you have power.
Yeah.
But you have to be also willing to help. It can't just be you need it.
Right. And you you know was it hard for you to like go out in the beginning and just be the kind of the leader? A lot of people, I think, are they're looking for a leader, right? And
Right.
looking for somebody to tell them the next thing to do. But I say, be your own leader. Like if there's not something in your area, start it. Was maybe a lot of people struggle with that. Like, have you ever kind of struggled with like going out there and like putting yourself out there, to be the, I guess, be a
I
leader type person?
If I am a leader, I wish I wasn't. But I probably am now, and with that comes a lot of pressure and responsibility. So the more leaders I can have around me, the better it is. So what I try to do is get people to also be leaders.
Yeah.
That's really my goal. And so, like, I think about this thing happened on the LFTN Freedom Cell Network Telegram group. There was somebody there who, whenever we had events, they were like, it's just too far. It's just too far. It's just too far. And people were like, come on, like drive a couple hours. And they were like, it's just too far. One day I said, I wish there was, and they said, I wish there was something near me. And I said, well, why don't you do a meetup near you and see who comes? Oh, they didn't really want to do it at their house because they're a private person. Cool. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, why don't you go to the state park or something nearby? It's free, so that's helpful. And they did. And now there's a monthly meetup in that part of Tennessee because that person who didn't want to drive started something near them. And so when I see people starting something near me, I'm like, I'll go to that. I'll go check it out. If I can get somewhere, I will. I can't go to everything. And I go to maybe one thing a month somewhere, one thing every other month. Like I'm missing April for sure. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it's cool to see these things start. And something that was happening 5 years ago, I think, in many of the sort of the preparedness networks is there was some territorialness going on about that.
Hmm.
Well, there's already something here. Well, maybe there's a subset of people who just really like heavy metal, who don't fit in,
Right.
and they just want to sit around playing loud heavy metal around the fire at night, and you're playing country. No offense, they'll hang out with you. They enjoy being with you, but every so often they just want to go out in the woods, blast some heavy metal, smoke a cigar, and talk.
Yeah.
Go do it. Go do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
The more of these we can have, the better, and the less worried we are about who's doing what, the better.
Yeah. Absolutely. I can't agree more with that. I think that and you never know who you're influencing by, when you're just speaking out about, these things. And
Yeah,
I will tell you, you guys, Nicole, you've been a huge influence on me with the Self Reliance Festival, and doing everything that you do. I listen to you guys a lot, and I try to take the actions in my own life because I see you guys as you're doing stuff, and it's inspiring.
well, I'm glad. The more
So
people doing stuff, the better we are. If we crash.
yeah, yeah.
And if we
So
don't crash, y'all are going to just be prosperous, and that'll be great too.
yeah, I mean it's just kind of that shift to going from fear to uh, that you're not worried. You have a little peace in your
Yeah,
mind, and that comes from taking action, I believe.
it
Um,
does.
it kind of resolves those fears a little bit, and those fears are how a lot of us are controlled, I believe. So
So does backpacking. Go backpack for a weekend. That's another good thing you can do. Go backpacking for a weekend. You're cold, you're too hot, whatever. You get bit by a bug. Bring a camp stove. Cook yourself one of them dehydrated meals that you put up in your closet. Realize how bad some of them are,
I
but you
used to,
live.
yeah,
And when you get done with that, you're like, I literally had, maybe $1,000. If you're like high end, I had $1,000 worth of gear on my back, and I survived the whole weekend. Why do I need this $250,000 house again?
yep,
When you realize how little you need, it's like, oh, things aren't that bad. Things aren't that bad.
right.
Like people freak out when the power goes out. I'm like, literally, it's been a day, man. You probably smell bad because you couldn't get hot water, but whatever. Like you
Right.
just smell bad. You'll be fine. Power's coming back on. You'll be fine.
Yep.
There are things you can do to make that more comfortable, but still, like, stop freaking out.
Well, that's a great note to uh, get all your plugs and everything where people can find you, Nicole. And any last words you want to leave the audience with tonight?
Sure. If you are interested in hearing more, I have an audio podcast at livingfreeintennessee.com or pretty much on any podcast catcher. I record most of them on YouTube now as well live. The ones that are audio have a few extra things in them. And of course, if you want to come check out a really cool event and you hear this between now and March 24th, we have the Self Reliance Festival. That's over at selfreliancefestival.com. You can find me on social networks. I'm Nicole Sauce, or just look for Living Free in Tennessee. And I gotta say, it's really cool that you've started a podcast, or I don't know if this is a podcast, a VCast, or whatever you want to call this. Because I bet you thought about it for a long time. You're like, should I start this thing? Should I start this thing? And then one day you were like, I'm going to start this thing. So Proud of you for starting your podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. Uh, yeah, I've been doing it for a while. You guys are
Yeah.
big inspirations, and super thankful for having for you taking the time to come on and join me tonight and
Sure.
have a conversation. So. Go check out Nicole, everybody. Go to the Self Reliance Festival, get your tickets. It's a really great event. Super. I always have a great time going there. And check her out on her podcast, Living Free in Tennessee. I've got all those links down below, so go check them out. And
Thanks, man.
thanks again, Nicole. All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace. All right. We'll see.